senador Morán por hacer posible esta audiencia. Los incidentes que hemos visto recientemente no son algo normal, son una advertencia que nuestro sistema está empujado al extremo. Y hoy podremos escuchar a personas clave sobre por qué tenemos tantos de estos incidentes y qué podemos hacer para mejorar nuestros márgenes de seguridad. Vamos a escuchar a la presidenta de la Junta Nacional de Seguridad en el Transporte, de Tim Morrell, del presidente de la Asociación de Controladores Aéreas, Drew Center, el presidente de la Asociación de Pilotos, el capitán Jason Ambrosi, y Randy Babbitt. Aunque puede haber desacuerdos que tienden a llevar a divergencias más que a compromisos, es importante que hayamos aprobado la ley de reautorización y estoy buscando un camino para que podamos lograr su aprobación de manera bipartidista. En mi opinión objetiva, la propuesta Caldwell-Cruz es superior a la alternativa de la Cámara de Representantes. La seguridad siempre tiene que ser primordial y es por eso que digo que esta puede ser la audiencia más importante de este año. Nuestra nación está experimentando una crisis de seguridad aérea. Estos incidentes se producen con demasiada frecuencia y me niego a estar en una actitud complaciente hasta que tengamos una situación fatal. Estamos tomando experiencias del sistema aéreo de los Estados Unidos y la creciente demanda ha creado una tormenta perfecta que ha erosionado los márgenes de seguridad hasta niveles extremadamente peligrosos. En muchas ocasiones la diferencia entre un accidente potencial y una tragedia se debe de un individuo que ha tomado medidas de emergencia y buena suerte. De acuerdo con el New York Times, en un periodo de 12 meses hubo 300 casos de cuasi colisiones con transportistas comerciales, prácticamente una al día. Y creo que tenemos aquí algunas imágenes. La imagen más oscura es un congelado de un video de alguien que estaba en el asiento adicional de un avión de JetBlue llegando al aeropuerto Logan. Aquí se muestra cómo un avión se entromete en la pista donde iban a aterrizar y llegaron a estar a 400 pies un avión del otro, tomando medidas de evasión. A pesar de que habían recibido instrucciones de esperar, el avión se coló a la pista. Si hubieran tenido un sistema de detección, se le habría notificado a los controladores de tráfico aéreo cuando el avión comenzó a circular sin autorización. Esto es crucial para que los controladores de tráfico puedan darle las instrucciones al avión que estaba aterrizando para evitar un desastre. Ese mismo mes, en el aeropuerto de Bergstrom, fuimos testigos de cómo la falta de servicios cruciales incrementó considerablemente el riesgo de una catástrofe. En ese incidente, un controlador que estaba trabajando sobre tiempo le dio autorización a un avión de FedEx para el aterrizaje en una pista donde se encontraba un avión de Southwest que iba a despegar. Estaba nublado, el controlador no podía ver directamente a la pista ni tenía radar terrestre para ubicar a los aviones, al 737, que estaba todavía en la pista cuando el otro estaba descendiendo. Las palabras no bastan para decir cuán cerca estuvieron los ocupantes del avión de morir ese día. Esta animación muestra lo que habría pasado cuando un 767 está a 100 pies del aterrizaje de un 737. Aquí los aviones estuvieron a menos de 100 pies el uno del otro. El control de tráfico no pudo ver cuán cerca estuvieron y fue el piloto el que inició el proceso de dar la vuelta y regresar para su aterrizaje. Y se le notificó a la otra aeronave que estuvieron a punto de una colisión. El controlador de tráfico nunca vio esta situación. El controlador también estaba trabajando sobre tiempo. Lamentablemente, esto se sigue produciendo. El mes pasado, un vuelo de Alaska Airlines estaba haciendo una vuelta al aeropuerto y se introdujo en el patrón de vuelo de un avión que estaba en una pista paralela. Estos incidentes deben ser tomados como eventos precursores que, si no se controlan, pueden resultar en una catástrofe mortal. tenemos múltiples capas de seguridad en nuestro sistema aéreo. La primera capa es el control de intercambio de información entre pilotos y controladores. Después, la iluminación de la pista, las luces que se tornan rojas cuando la pista está ocupada. Y en condiciones ideales, la cuarta capa de seguridad es el radar terrestre. Y la última línea de defensa es la tripulación, especialmente el primer oficial y el capitán. A pesar de esto, demasiados incidentes se han producido en esta última línea de defensa. Y el sistema que obliga a los pilotos a tomar medidas evasivas de emergencia para salvar vidas es un sistema disfuncional o uno que está agobiado por los riesgos. Estos nuevos riesgos pueden ser el resultado de falta de experiencia que obliga a la industria a tener una fuerza laboral con menos experiencia, desde pilotos a técnicos a controladores. Parece que hemos tenido la suerte de tener pilotos con experiencia en muchos de estos casos y eso evitó llegar a una situación de desastre. Pero seguir contando con la buena suerte no es algo sustentable ni es responsable. Espero que escuchemos más de esto de nuestros testigos, pero algo que sí sabemos es que este no es el momento de debilitar las normas de seguridad post-Kogan. Este es el momento de fortalecer esas medidas. Esto incluye darle prioridad a uno de los elementos fundamentales de nuestro sistema, el control de tráfico aéreo. Cada controlador de tráfico aéreo tiene el privilegio y la presión de trabajar en una ocupación de mucha tensión hasta en un buen día. Pero la situación actual obliga a los controladores a trabajar semanas de hasta 60 horas porque el 99% de los aeropuertos no tienen suficiente personal y carecen de tecnología de seguridad. Como piloto y como pasajero, me niego a aceptar una situación donde la vida de la población esté en manos de servidores públicos que están agobiados y sobrecargados de trabajo. Hace más de una década se establecieron pautas en la Administración Federal de Aviación, normas sobre el descanso de los pilotos. Esto demostró que optimizar el desempeño humano requiere optimizar los periodos de descanso y recuperación. Y en cuanto al desempeño, es mucho lo que está en juego para los controladores de tráfico aéreo. Se le da prioridad al tema de los controladores fatigados y el Congreso debe actuar para asegurar que este personal sea suficiente para acabar de una vez por todas con la era de obligar a los controladores a trabajar hasta 60 horas por semana, con frecuencia sin la asistencia de herramientas vitales. Estoy ansiosa por escuchar a nuestros testigos sobre cómo podemos mejorar nuestros márgenes de seguridad y llevarlos a donde tienen que estar. Le cedo la palabra al señor Morán. Gracias, Presidenta Duckworth. Gracias por convocar a esta audiencia y por su colaboración trabajando conmigo y con otros para que la subcomisión cumpla con su misión respecto a la aviación. La Administración Federal de Aviación maneja uno de los sistemas aéreos más complejos del mundo, supervisando miles de vuelos cada día. La seguridad es muy importante, pero es un proceso en evolución y continuamente debemos reevaluar nuestro sistema para tener las mayores salvaguardas posibles en posición. Para evitar incidentes graves como intromisiones en las pistas, me complace estar con usted en esta audiencia. También tenemos que asegurarnos que estos incidentes no sean indicio de un problema más grave de fondo. Sabemos que la demanda de la aviación comercial se espera que aumente y tendremos más aeronaves en nuestro espacio aéreo. Estamos hablando de 1.400.000 empleos. Estamos hablando de una contribución sustancial a nuestra economía. Así que tenemos que estar listos para enfrentar las demandas presentes y futuras. Los incidentes peligrosos destacan también la necesidad de que el Congreso apruebe los fondos de presupuesto para la Administración Federal de Aviación. Esto requiere la acción de la Comisión y consideración en el Senado. Así que aguardo ansiosamente que esto tenga lugar y quiero trabajar para que así sea. Ya confirmamos a la directora de la Administración Federal de Aviación, una posición vital para el país. Así que me complace que se haya confirmado la persona nominada y queremos trabajar sabiendo que esta persona va a desempeñar su función adecuadamente. Espero que podamos trabajar de manera diferente a como lo hemos hecho en el pasado. La Administración Federal de Aviación está en una coyuntura crucial y enfrentamos múltiples retos y la Administración Federal de Aviación está en una posición clave y tenemos que asegurar que Estados Unidos sigue siendo líder en innovación aeroespacial y que todo lo que hacemos lo hagamos de manera segura. Gracias. Gracias, senador Morán. Gracias, presidenta Duckworth. Gracias, senador Morán, por esta importante audiencia. No puedo pensar en dos personas más preparadas para encabezar esta tarea en nuestra comisión que ustedes dos. Gracias por hacer esto. Y estoy muy de acuerdo con sus comentarios. Han delineado exactamente el por qué estamos aquí esta mañana. Esta tarea constante que tenemos de mantenernos al día con la innovación, la seguridad y la competitividad. Y quiero agradecerle a los testigos por estar aquí porque pienso que ellos van a traer a la luz muchos de los retos que hemos enfrentado en el pasado y lo que necesitamos hacer de aquí en adelante. El proceso de la ley de certificación aérea contempla una serie de pautas mediante las cuales podemos mejorar la seguridad y fundamentalmente decimos que debemos tener un reporte de tendencias cada año para estar más atentos a estas tendencias. Esta audiencia es reflejo de eso, de una tendencia que estamos observando y por qué tenemos que hacer más para corregirlo. Quiero agradecerle a la Junta Nacional de Seguridad en el Transporte por su misión. Ellos han sonado la alarma y esta es una de las razones por las que el senador Morán dice que tenemos que tener la ley de presupuesto de la Administración Federal de Aviación porque tiene las herramientas para poder enfrentar este reto. Primero y principal, en el testimonio hablábamos de faltas de personal, fatiga de personal, deficiencia de supervisión, distracciones, verificación inefectiva y la necesidad de más entrenamiento. Fin de la cita. Esta es una sinopsis. Por eso necesitamos más controladores de tráfico aéreo para poder enfrentar esta situación. No podemos tener gente trabajando 6 días a la semana. Necesitamos gente que tenga el descanso suficiente y la capacidad de lidiar con esto. Y como decía mi colega la senadora Duckworth, en uno de los trabajos más tensionantes que existen. Segundo, hemos hablado también de la importancia de tener equipo de detección en los aeropuertos, radar terrestre y tecnología electrónica para que los controladores puedan darle seguimiento al desplazamiento de aeronaves en tierra. Las áreas que están pendientes. Esta es la razón por la que necesitamos esta legislación. Estamos aprobando más de 18.000 millones de dólares para que todos nuestros aeropuertos grandes y medianos cuenten con esta tecnología. Sé que vamos a escuchar otros comentarios esta mañana y otras respuestas. Y coincido con el senador Morán, tenemos que hacer este trabajo y tenemos que seguir avanzando. Yo creo, igual que él, que la aviación va a seguir creciendo. Queremos que así sea y que la competencia internacional también va a estar presente. Así que tenemos que estar a la vanguardia y demostrar que tenemos la capacidad de crecer en el futuro y de tener el sistema más seguro del mundo. Dicho esto, gracias, señora presidenta, por esta importante audiencia. Gracias. El senador Cruz no está aquí en este momento. Vamos a reservarle tiempo para que dé sus declaraciones iniciales cuando esté presente. En el entretanto, comenzaremos con el testimonio de los testigos. Le cedo la palabra a la presidenta de la Junta Nacional de Seguridad en el Transporte. Gracias, presidenta Duckworth. Gracias, senadores Morán y Canwell, por estar a la vanguardia en este tema y por haberme invitado hoy. Quisiera comenzar enfatizando nuestro increíble récord de seguridad. Tenemos el espacio aéreo más seguro del mundo. Punto. Los esfuerzos cruciales de todos los presentes han contribuido a nuestra reputación de ser el estándar mundial de seguridad aérea. Tenemos mucho de qué sentirnos orgullosos, pero podemos hacer que el sistema sea aún más seguro. Como vemos aquí, Hubo 23 incursiones graves en pistas en el último año. Eh, Hace una década fueron 11. Estas intromisiones también se están produciendo más rápidamente en la última década. Estos eventos son raros per se, pero nuestro sistema de seguridad está mostrando que está a punto de estar agobiado y eso no lo podemos ignorar. Hemos abierto investigación de 7 incursiones solamente en este año y en casi la mitad de los casos las aeronaves estuvieron a escasa distancia unas de otras. Tenemos el incidente que ocurrió en Houston hace 2 semanas. En conjunción, esto ha puesto en peligro más de 1.300 vidas. Esto aparte de otros casos que estamos investigando. Por suerte, nadie resultó lesionado de gravedad en ninguno de estos casos, pero pudo no haber sido así. Solo se requiere un caso, una advertencia no atendida para tener una tragedia, una respuesta incorrecta para destruir la confianza del público en un sistema que se ha construido durante décadas. Esto debe ser un llamado de atención antes que ocurra algo más catastrófico. No es la primera vez que vemos esto. Hemos hecho la misma advertencia en 2007 y lo hicimos después del incidente de 2017 en San Francisco, cuando 2 aeronaves estuvieron a punto de chocar con otros 3 aviones en la pista de carretaje. Esto resultó en una distancia de separación vertical de 10 a 20 pies. En total, más de 1.000 personas estaban en ese momento en riesgo inminente de lesión severa o de muerte. Sé que ustedes van a querer hablar de las investigaciones abiertas y conocer los detalles. La Junta Nacional de Seguridad en el Transporte es muy cuidadosa recopilando información sobre estos incidentes antes de derivar conclusiones o hacer recomendaciones. Yo no puedo discutir los detalles de investigaciones en curso. Sí puedo hablarles de algunas observaciones. Después de la pandemia hemos visto un repunte considerable en el tráfico aéreo, pero también estamos viendo escasez de personal de control de tráfico aéreo, lo cual resulta en trabajo sobre tiempo obligatorio, distracciones y menos oportunidades para tener entrenamiento valioso. En las aeronaves, la fatiga y las distracciones llevan a desviaciones de las regulaciones de la Administración Federal de Aviación. En toda la industria tenemos una nueva generación de personal que requiere entrenamiento y guía. Y vemos también gente que está enfrentando severos problemas de salud mental. A esto se suma la falta de tecnología para tener redundancia y para evitar errores humanos. La redundancia es fundamental para nuestro estelar récord de seguridad. Ha sido el modelo para evitar accidentes y percances en otros métodos de transporte. Pero las tensiones en nuestro sistema aéreo y el personal son algo que no se puede subestimar. Antes de concluir, quisiera agradecerles a todos ustedes por apoyar a la Junta Nacional de Seguridad en el Transporte, pero ahora necesito su ayuda. La Junta necesita los recursos para llevar adelante nuestra vital misión. Recibimos $145 millones en el presupuesto de 2024, lo cual está incluido en la versión de la Cámara de Representantes. El Senado añadió $1.340.000. Necesitamos equiparar estas cifras. Nuestros recursos se han mantenido estancados casi desde 1997. Estos pequeños incrementos se han canalizado para incrementos de salario bien merecidos, pero hemos logrado mucho. Hemos eliminado retrasos, hemos reforzado el personal y hemos hecho inversiones significativas en tecnología. Gracias y estoy ansiosa por responder a sus preguntas. Gracias y ahora tiene la palabra Tim Morrell, jefe de operaciones de la Administración Federal de Aviación. Gracias, miembros de la comisión, gracias por esta oportunidad de rendir testimonio junto con mis colegas sobre un tema que hemos descrito como accidentes inminentes. La transparencia y el compromiso con una mejora continua son vitales para mejorar la seguridad aérea. Ustedes conocen las estadísticas. El sistema aéreo de Estados Unidos es el más seguro del mundo. No ha habido un percance fatal desde 2009 y en mis 38 años de servicio público dedicado a la seguridad aérea, entiendo que la seguridad no es una estadística, sino un proceso continuo de mejoramiento, de eliminar riesgos antes que se conviertan en estadísticas. Cada evento, sea un hecho aislado o indicativo de una tendencia, es algo que no tomamos a la ligera. Un cuasi percance es demasiado. Este es un trabajo de equipo entre el personal de control de tráfico, pilotos, pilotos comerciales, pilotos privados. Todos tenemos que trabajar para proteger al público. Tenemos redundancias en nuestras tecnologías y procedimientos. Si un sistema falla, otro entra en acción. Debo destacar que el nivel de seguridad que tenemos en este momento solo es posible gracias a la transparencia y la colaboración entre la Administración Federal de Aviación y el uso del espacio aéreo. Nosotros nos sentimos orgullosos de nuestra cultura, lo que quiere decir que valoramos el compartir información de seguridad con la agencia, la industria y el sector laboral para reducir los riesgos, para aprender unos de otros y para aplicar correctivos. El compartir esta información nos hace más seguros y más fuertes. En el año fiscal 2023 hubo más de 54 millones de aterrizajes y despegues en el país y tuvimos numerosas incursiones en las pistas. Es importante destacar que en los casos más severos se evitaron colisiones con un muy estrecho margen. En total, 23, lo cual nos lleva al punto de la transparencia. Toda esta información está a disposición del público. Sin embargo, aun cuando esto representa solo un 1,3% del porcentaje, cualquier número es inaceptable. Y estamos trabajando para eliminar estos eventos en el sistema. Nuestra meta es llegar a cero de estos cuasi accidentes. La transparencia y los reportes colaborativos nos llevan a ver la respuesta inmediata de estas instituciones. En la cumbre de seguridad aérea que tuvimos en marzo de 2023, se reunió a líderes de la industria aérea de todo el país, incluyendo representantes sindicales de las principales organizaciones gremiales, para mejorar la seguridad aérea. La presidenta de la NTSB también habló de esto y de estos eventos de seguridad. Es el mismo enfoque de colaboración que nos ha permitido virtualmente eliminar el riesgo de muertes en el transporte aéreo comercial. Estamos también trabajando con otros usuarios del sistema aéreo, transportistas, pilotos privados y demás. Hemos escuchado de soluciones tecnológicas que ciertamente son cruciales. Estamos adelantando tecnologías para atender preocupaciones de seguridad y estamos mejorando y utilizando tecnologías de control de tráfico terrestre. La tendencia en general está bajando, pero no es suficiente. Como decía al comienzo, nos sentimos orgullosos de nuestra cultura de seguridad, pero no podemos caer en la complacencia. Nos sentimos optimistas de que nuestro trabajo va a seguir teniéndolos a la vanguardia en seguridad. La Administración Federal de Aviación seguirá colaborando con todos los que utilizan el espacio aéreo nacional para mejorar la seguridad con la meta de eliminar los riesgos. De aquí en adelante, el número aceptable debe ser cero. Gracias por la oportunidad de hablar esto y estoy ansioso por responder a sus preguntas. Gracias. Y ahora tiene la palabra Rich Santa de la Asociación Nacional de Tráfico Aéreo. Presidenta Duckworth, senador Morán, gracias por esta oportunidad. La medida más importante que puede adoptar el Congreso para la seguridad aérea es aprobar una ley de reautorización de la Administración Federal de Aviación antes del fin de año, instruyendo a esta entidad a controlar los problemas de personal como una base para el plan de personal de la Administración Federal de Aviación. Hay un déficit de casi 1.000 controladores de tráfico aéreo en el día de hoy, muchos más que hace una década. Y seguimos utilizando un modelo de más de una década de disonancia entre la contratación y el personal requerido. Se requiere algo totalmente nuevo. La Administración Federal de Aviación tiene que adoptar los estándares más modernos desarrollados conjuntamente por el grupo de trabajo. Esto lo hizo un grupo integrado por organizaciones de control de tráfico aéreo y por nuestra asociación, y esto verificó y validó el trabajo del grupo. Los objetivos que utiliza la Administración Federal de Aviación en la actualidad son estándares desarrollados hace más de una década. Ya es más que suficiente tiempo para actualizarlos. Las nuevas metas tienen que usarse como la base para tener un plan de personal y para que se tenga un cuadro más claro en el Congreso y en el país sobre las necesidades de personal. Agradecemos que se haya contemplado esto en los planes de este año. La falta de personal ha obligado a la Administración Federal de Aviación a obligar al personal a trabajar sobre tiempo. Esto conduce a fatiga. El año pasado, controladores en 40% de nuestras instalaciones tuvieron que trabajar 6 días a la semana, por lo menos una vez al mes. Los controladores de tráfico aéreo ya tienen una profesión cargada de tensión. El trabajo tan prolongado durante el mes lleva a fatiga e incrementa los riesgos. De hecho, en junio, el Departamento de Transporte emitió una auditoría diciendo que si bien Estados Unidos tenía uno de los sistemas de tráfico aéreo más seguros del mundo, la falta de controladores certificados era un riesgo para las operaciones de tráfico aéreo. Para poder llegar a las metas de personal, es necesario contratar a la totalidad de los egresados de la academia por los próximos años. Somos copatrocinantes de la Ley de Seguridad Aérea de 2023, que pensamos debe ser parte de la legislación de reautorización. También tiene que haber transparencia en las necesidades de fondos para instalaciones y equipo, lo que contempla recursos para infraestructura física, reparaciones y mantenimiento, modernización de equipo y proyectos de inversión. El Congreso siempre ha respondido a las necesidades de la agencia, pero consistentemente se ha pedido menos de lo necesario. No se han hecho ni siquiera ajustes por inflación. Esto le ha impedido a esta entidad cumplir con sus metas de modernización, lo que ha significado un atraso considerable. El depender de un modelo anacrónico le ha impedido a la agencia el adquirir el equipo de seguridad fundamental. Hay equipo obsoleto en funcionamiento. El sistema NOTAM a comienzos de año, que resultó en el cierre del espacio aéreo, fue un claro ejemplo de este riesgo. Las limitaciones de fondos también afectan el diseño y la aplicación de nuevas tecnologías para mejorar la seguridad, como el sistema de información situacional en los aeropuertos para evitar incursiones en las pistas. Nosotros apoyamos la propuesta que tiene el Senado porque junto con los fondos para infraestructura, inversión y empleo, esto cumplirá con las expectativas de este año. Quiero destacar también la importancia de impedir un cierre del gobierno que obligaría a cerrar la academia de entrenamiento, demoraría la contratación de controladores y la modernización, y esto tendría un impacto catastrófico en el sistema. Muchas gracias por su tiempo y estoy ansioso por sus preguntas.
That's an air traffic controller speaking right there. He's on the dot. Thank you, Mr. Santa, and I recognize Captain Ambrosi for his remarks.
Thank you. I'm not sure I'll be quite so accurate as Rich was, but good morning. Thank you, Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, Chair Duckworth, Ranking Member Moran, and members of the committee for holding this hearing. My name is Jason Ambrosi. I'm an international captain on the Boeing 767 and president of the Airline Pilots Association International. It's an honor to testify today representing more than 77,000 airline pilots who fly for 42 airlines in the United States and Canada. I'd like to begin by thanking this committee and the entire committee for its commitment to keeping American aviation system the safest in the world. In the context of this extraordinary level of aviation safety that government, labor, and industry have achieved in the United States, recent near misses remind us that we can never let our guard down. From employees to procedures, there is a lot of new in the post-COVID air transportation system. We must do more, not less, to safeguard airline passengers, crews, and shippers. The success that we've achieved in the aviation system didn't happen by chance. Rather, it stems from decades of industry-wide work and commitment to collaboration, data collection and analysis, and hazard identification and mitigation. Our progress has also resulted from critical changes to regulations governing pilot qualification and training, fatigue, airline operations and maintenance, and technology. Airline pilots and other aviation employees are proud to play a critical role in aviation safety. Through voluntary safety reporting programs, we're the ones, often the only ones, to identify safety issues before they develop into accidents. The presence of two highly trained and well-rested pilots working on every airliner flight deck is another critical factor in safety. We saw this during the near-miss incident in Austin this past February. It could have resulted in tragedy were it not for the actions of the two FedEx pilots working on board that flight deck together. Such incidents make it clear that with demand returning more quickly than some anticipated, this is no time to reduce safety. Rather, these events compel us to strengthen safety through data collection efforts such as the Commercial Aviation Safety Team and technologies like NextGen. More work can and must be done to prevent near misses and other incidents. ALPA is calling for expanding the capabilities at more U.S. airports in areas including flight profile optimization, STARS remote surveillance displays, ADS-B out equipage, and NextGen equipage. ALPA strongly supports doing more to advance NextGen to enhance pilots and air traffic controllers' ability to pinpoint the position of aircraft while in flight and on the ground. Moving NextGen forward will not only help prevent near misses and enhance safety, but it will also improve traffic management and aircraft utilization, reduce flight delays, cut aviation emissions, and contribute to airline profitability. We commend the U.S. government for investing $26 million in new funding to install or replace legacy aviation systems with new technology to ensure that pilots and controllers benefit from the state-of-the-art runway, surveillance, and information. And we support the White House request for additional funding to extend these safety improvements to more U.S. airports. ALPA is committed to ensuring that all U.S. airports benefit from the same high level of safety regardless of size or location. This committee's bipartisan FAA Reauthorization Act of 2023 included provisions to enhance safety and prevent near-miss incidents. We thank you for your focus on these important safety advancements. Recently, there has understandably been heightened awareness of aviation workers' mental health. No one is more committed than ALPA to ensuring that airline pilots are fit for duty and have the support that they and all of us need when facing challenges. In 2024, ALPA will mark its 50th year of developing and implementing programs that support pilot mental health. Our work has set the standard for the global airline industry and is even used by other industries and countries. However, we as an industry must do more. We applaud this committee for addressing this issue in your 2023 reauthorization bill. This is a good start, and we stand ready to work with any stakeholder to make improvements in this critical area. Thanks to this committee and its commitment to collaborating with labor and other aviation stakeholders, U.S. air travel is extraordinarily safe. ALPA pilots are dedicated to protecting this nation's global leadership and moving forward to advance safety in our skies. Thank you.
Not bad. Only he had an extra 4 seconds. I now recognize former FAA Administrator Randy Babbitt. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Duckworth and Chair Cantwell and Vice Chair Moran. Thank you for having me here today. I'm pleased to be speaking today with you, with folks from the FAA, the NTSB, and labor in general. And I was pleased to lead the FAA and ALPA in the past. I was a commercial airline pilot for a number of years. As ALPA president, I worked back in the day with Administrator Hinson to launch the FAA's Aviation Safety Action Program. We also secured one level of safety, and that's when we moved Part 135 operations and their regulations to comply with 121 operations. We all, at that point in time, we also required each of our ALPA pilot groups to establish and embrace professional standards. And as President Obama's FAA administrator, I worked with the FAA safety professionals, which had been, we updated the pilot rest rules, which had been on the NTSB's most wanted list for about 2 decades, so we got that done. We worked with carriers to implement the Aviation Safety Information Analysis and Sharing System. We advanced work with a commercial aviation safety team, CAST, which reported in 2008 that the risk in fatal commercial accidents had been reduced by 83%. And all that work was done in conjunction and working together with all the parties. However, in mid-2009, I testified before this very committee after a tragic accident. And knowing we must do more to enhance aviation safety, I instituted a call to action urging unions to focus on professionalism and professional standards committees. We asked the carriers to adopt voluntary safety and data sharing programs. Data, when shared and acted upon without fear and no retribution, is what makes us safe. And this remains critical, as it's clear that what got us here today is not a guarantee will take us into the future. A lack of accidents today is simply not a good predictor of future accidents. Our environment is changing, and recent coast calls and incursions are symptoms of strain. And I highly urge a strong refocus on professionalism, eliminating complacency if it can, and boosting crew resource management throughout our operations. And as our operating environment evolves, the training of our professionals has to advance with it. Flight simulators can be used in structured training courses to accurately recreate the experience of flight operations and a fully immersive experience, forcing pilots to encounter aircraft malfunctions, rare events like rapid decompressions, emergency descents, high-speed rejected takeoffs, dual engine failures, severe icing conditions, flight control malfunctions, full stalls, and doing all of this without placing any lives in danger. Simulators also present the opportunity to incorporate actual accident and incident scenarios into training. Pilots should experience the factors that led to the accidents and learn how to successfully recover so that such accidents never happen again. The tools are here. It's backed by substantial data, and yet there's a hesitation to act. But the FOCA rule was never meant to be static. The Safety Act clearly directs that proper, quote, supplemental training may be used to offset flight time requirements when doing so brings us to a higher level of safety. And as knowledge and training techniques progress, additional training credit should be well used to improve excuse me, both safety and skills. The FAA has followed up with 2 aviation rulemaking committees comprised of experts from across aviation, including ALPA, and the members of both ARCs have unanimously supported supplemental training and recommended a curriculum to replace simple flight hours with advanced training and mentoring. This guidance has not been implemented, and in my opinion, it should be. I'm not alone in saying this. Our current administrator has urged the adoption of modern training techniques like simulation. And earlier, I joined with 8 former FAA administrators and 2 former ALPA presidents, I happen to be in both buckets, to urge the adoption of tested and trusted new technologies to strengthen air safety. We said in that letter, if scenario-based simulator training was a routine part of gaining 1,500 hours required for an ATP, we could require updating training and expose the kind of scenarios that have led to the recent rash of runway incursions and near misses. We also said, as pilot training and technology evolves, it's the responsibility of the FAA and policymakers to evolve with it. Well, that concludes my message today, and I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Babbitt. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. As you know well, addressing pilot fatigue was a high priority issue for the FAA under your leadership. In December of 2009, then FAA Associate Administrator Margaret Peggy Gilligan testified before this very committee that, and I quote, "We believe," this is quoting her, "we believe that it is critical whenever possible to incorporate scientific information on fatigue and human sleep physiology into regulations on flight crew scheduling. Such scientific information can help to maintain the safety margin and promote optimum crew performance and alertness during flight operations. More importantly, FAA acted in late 2011 to publish new rules on pilot fatigue, which many, including the then chair of the NTSB, believe was a contributing factor to the deadly, tragic, and preventable Kogan crash that killed 50 people in early 2009. FAA's rules were common sense: limit the amount of time pilots can be on duty and pilot flight time, and implement a minimum requirement of rest before a duty day. Chair Hamidi, you recently stated, and I quote, "When it comes to these recent high-profile aviation incidents, mistakes by air traffic control, flight crews, or ground personnel are sometimes cited as a contributing factor. But is it really human error when 96% of your workplaces are exhausted and don't have adequate staffing?" Chair Hamidi, is it time for FAA and Congress to re-examine and update rest rules that are tailored to optimize air traffic controller performance?
Well, it isn't just the number of hours, it's the scheduling practices. And then if you're already short-staffed, then you have people who are working mandatory overtime, 6 days a week, 10-hour days. And then when you look at the schedule, it's a constantly rotating schedule. I have one from one event, a schedule for a week from one event that we're currently investigating. We've got 2 evenings, a morning shift, another evening shift, another morning shift, a day off, an evening. All of that can impact your circadian rhythm. So, and then where you end up with that is distraction, fatigue, you're missing things, you're forgetting things. That's all an impact.
I feel like, what was taken as the minimum amount of rest has now become the standard way that we schedule folks, and I don't think that that is sustainable. President Santa, could you share the air traffic controller workforce perspective on why rest rules are needed to better protect ATC crews and the flying public?
Thank you for the question. It comes down to the redundancy and the resiliency of our staffing. We're so short-staffed in most or many of our facilities that service air travel right now that we don't have the opportunity or the capacity to have a 5-day work week with 8-hour days. The norm, like you said, keeping the system active, keeping the capacity at the level that it is expected to be, requires 6-day work weeks and 10-hour days due to the fact the hiring, FAA's model of hiring, and what they produce on the controller workforce plan has exacerbated the situation, resulting in 1,000 fewer controllers in this elevated aviation upturn. It's unsustainable, and it needs to be changed through FAA reauth because the FAA has been unwilling to collaboratively involve these new processes.
Thank you. If Congress's primary role in passing the Airline Safety Act of 2010 was to prevent future Kogan-era-type disasters, one must recognize that it has been a success, starting with a 99.8% reduction in Part 121 fatalities since enactment, since when the rules went into effect. We must never take the post-Kogan safety system for granted, and that's why I strongly oppose tinkering with the 2010's law statutory requirements, including the 1,500-hour rule. Now, as a military pilot, I flew simulators, and I agree. If you have 6 degree of motion, full immersion simulators, that is an immense tool and a very useful tool. But I do think that if we just substitute some of the 1,500 hours and just say structured simulator time, but don't specifically say what type of simulator, what kind of training that's going to be. You can burn holes in the sky in a simulator just as well as you can burn holes in the sky in a 152. So I think we need to be clear when we say, let's talk about simulators, that we're talking about full motion, 6 degree, full immersion simulators, and not Microsoft Flight Simulator sitting in a hotel ballroom someplace. Our safety management system protocols do not appear to be accounting for new risks in our system, and the aggregate of these risks, such as less experienced workforce and pervasive air traffic control shortages. Mr. Ambrosi, at a time when we have a 737 and a 767 flying within 100 feet of each other, and every other month seems to bring a new chilling runway incursion or near miss, would you agree that the most prudent and safest course of action would be to add additional experience and training requirements rather than seeking to weaken or water down the 1,500-hour rule?
Well, thank you for the question. Absolutely. It's an all of the above. You need that real-world experience as well as better training. So it's an all of the above.
I do think that what we can do is, as you're trying to get to that 1,500-hour rule, we could break that down and say you actually need a certain number of IMC hours, you need a certain number of cross-country hours and be very specific in that, which is what happens in the military, which is much more structured than their average person trying to get 1,500 hours at the local FBO. I am out of time, over time, and with that, I will recognize the Ranking Member Moran for his questions.
Chairwoman, again, thank you. Mr. Santa, thank you for highlighting the importance of no shutdown. It ought to be evident, but you outlined a number of serious things that can and will happen if we fail to come together. And again, while we're trying to get ahead of the problem, this would put us behind the ball one more time. So thanks for bringing that to our attention, to my attention. And we'll work to try to avoid any kind of gap in funding. Chairman Hamadeh, thank you for reminding me. I'm a new member of the Transportation HUD Appropriations Subcommittee, and I will take your suggestion, your request to heart. It's not always that I get asked to follow the House lead, but I appreciate you bringing that to my attention as well. Mr. Orell and Mr. Santa, last holiday season, we experienced some significant operational, really a meltdown across the U.S. airspace that was exacerbated by NOTAM system outage, which we've working to solve with legislation as well. It led to thousands of cancellations. What can I tell my constituents and Americans about what to expect this holiday season with Thanksgiving approaching and the winter holidays just around the corner?
Thank you, Senator. I can assure you that we have been working collaboratively with both labor and industry to address the issues that were highlighted during some of the more challenging times last holiday season. Of course, we had a significant weather event that was unprecedented in some ways with the deep freeze that immediately followed the snowstorm that had occurred. I just met recently this week with all of my counterparts across the airlines. They're in a much better position as far as their overall staffing, their operational control, and the amount of coordination they do with the FAA. Additionally, while we're working to prioritize and train as many controllers, hire, train, and certify as many controllers as possible, while we have a long way to go, many of the facilities are much healthier than they were previously. And then we work collaboratively to the extent possible to have as many people in place to support those peak holiday periods. Once we were through the Christmas and New Year holidays last year, the follow-on holiday travel periods where we see that peak in demand were much smoother, had much less interruptions. We certainly had some challenging weather events that we don't expect traffic to fly through, but overall the recovery from each of those weather events, generally speaking, were one-day recoveries versus the multi-day type of recovery that you saw last year. So we feel in a much better position than we did last year, and we're continuing to get better.
Thank you for the question. I'm going to assume that the government doesn't shut down because that changes everything.
Ironically, I was sitting here thinking that's related to the shutdown. I was thinking it personally. I may need to be flying because I can't get home because of a shutdown during the holidays. So this is not a personal question necessarily, but maybe.
So I'm going to take the actual aspects of our situation and not the changes in weather and the situation, because we are not healthier than we were last year controller-wise. I think FAA's own numbers indicate we have potentially 6 more air traffic controllers than we had last year system-wide. That is not an expansive increase of what we need. We're at, if I can get the numbers here, our certified air traffic controller number right now is 10,721. Using their decade-old number, we should be at 13,097. And using the new collaborative resource workgroup number, we should be at 14,335. It's an unhealthy system that needs maximum hiring by the FAA's own admission for 10 years to get us to the old number. 10 years of maximum hiring at the current throughput to get us to a 10-year-old number. At that point, it would be a 20-year-old staffing number in our facilities.
What role does the size of the class and the capabilities of training and education in Oklahoma City at the Air Traffic Control Training Center, what role does that play in the lack of necessary air traffic controllers?
I do admit, I think the capacity is right around 1,800, potentially to 2,000. And Tim and the FAA are working to try to increase that along with us, moving some of the ancillary things out of Oak City. But the more throughput we get, the more controllers that we can hire, the more success we will have sooner. We cannot unqualify the standards or the professionalism or the expectation that when you certify in a facility, you're capable in doing this most challenging profession at the highest level. So challenging, but more throughput is needed.
Without changing the qualifications, there's nothing wrong. In fact, it's very helpful to increase the size of the class.
Absolutely. If we can increase the throughput without changing the qualifications, it's much needed.
Thank you.
Chairwoman Cantwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Captain Ambrosia, pilots have rest requirements. Why is that?
Because we need rest. We absolutely need rest. And, you know, out of the 2010 bill, there was a lot of reforms, not just pilot training, but we went to a science-based fatigue, flight and duty time, rest rules about eight years ago. And it's been a success because now it's based on science, not some arbitrary number where it limits our duty day instead of just flight time. But, you know, having an adequately rested pilot or controller or anyone that's a frontline worker is essential.
Well, that's where I was going, because to your side there is the chair of the NTSB, and she's saying she's worried about their fatigue level. So as a captain, you're worried about the air traffic controller fatigue system?
I think Rich is probably better to comment on how their scheduling goes, because I'm not an expert in air traffic control scheduling, but I can tell you as a pilot, our rest is essential, so I would imagine it would be similar for them.
Thank you. So I wanted to ask about this also. Did you want to make a comment about that, Mr. Sand? Okay. The air surface detection equipment model. One of the things that technology does do is it helps illuminate the risks, and certainly in a busy environment, and certainly one in which people are paying attention to lots of different things, the fact that it can be a more illuminating visual so that it's getting people's attention is also part of this system. We have, in the Senate bill, increased the funding $18.2 billion over 5 years, and an increase that would put money to, as I said earlier, upgrade all the large and mid-size airports. I'm assuming all of you support this investment, but if you could just give me a verbal yes.
Yes, but we'd always also like technology in the cockpit of an airplane.
The same technology you're saying?
There is direct alerting technology to pilots that can alert them that they're on the wrong runway, that they're on a taxiway, or that there's something in front of them.
Okay, just down the line, if they support this language that's in the bill.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, Senator?
Okay, so it takes, my understanding is it takes almost a year to get all this implemented, even if we got this bill passed right now. So I'm assuming, Chairwoman Hamady, that you think this is something we should work with and dispatch to get this technology deployed as soon as possible.
Absolutely. It has prevented some almost accidents, and so we need the technology. Again, we need technology for air traffic controllers, but we also need technology in the cockpit of airplanes.
But the situational awareness, I think, Mr. Babbitt, back to the original next-gen days, the whole concept about next-gen is to digitize our system off of the radar system, but the whole aspect of it on the ground that would also give you situational awareness was one of the things trumpeted by the bill. And we can sit here all day and probably think about why we're in this situation of near misses. I think you described it accurately. You're coming out of the COVID and ramping up in traffic. We have situations where we don't have the workforce that maybe we would give us the rest time, but we do know that we have technology solutions that if we just got them deployed, this would help.
Well, and usually what I hear when I talk about technology is it's too expensive and we don't have the resources. We have to give the FAA the resources to invest. They need those resources. So we are strongly supportive of giving them the funding that they need to succeed at their jobs.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chairwoman Cantwell. Next to speak will be Senator Sinema, recognized for 5 minutes. She's via remote. somebody else? We can move on to the next senator who's waiting to speak and come back to Senator Sinema when she's available. I also have Senator Thune. Is he available? We're running all over the Capitol today, all of us in and out, so.
Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Now I can. Senator Sinema, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Wonderful, thank you. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Thank you to each of our witnesses for joining us today. Aviation safety is the FAA's mission, and I have long stated that the United States needs to remain the gold standard of aviation safety. To continue to set that gold standard, we need to continue to utilize all the tools available to us and hold hearings like this one to discuss opportunities to advance aviation safety. I appreciate the committee's emphasis on safety, but innovating to improve our national airspace. The number of near misses makes it clear that now is the time to act to improve safety. It's unacceptable to wait for a tragedy to force us into action. We've heard a lot today about how essential simulator technology is for training air traffic controllers because it allows hands-on training for emergencies and unforeseen events without endangering actual aircraft. In fact, the FAA specifically called for updating simulator technology for air traffic controllers in response to recent near misses. We should all have the same desire to use the most advanced technologies to update our pilot training rules. And we should make sure that the 1,500 hours of pilot training provides the best and most practical training available in order to maximize safety. Administrator Babbitt, you joined each of our other Senate-confirmed FAA administrators since 1997 and 2 former ALPA presidents in a letter arguing that advanced flight simulator technology is required to ensure the best training outcomes. Your testimony today reiterates the need for training to evolve with technology. Can you explain why modern advanced flight simulators are essential to modern pilot training, including the unique ability to practice avoiding near misses and dealing with other emergencies?
Well, thank you for the question. And yes, I think it's incredibly important. I think what you have in modern simulation today is the ability to recreate or repeat events that have already happened. You can put people in situations that you would never put them in a real airplane. You would not take an airplane into heavy icing conditions. You would not do but you can do things. You can simulate, for example, a clearance that clearly was a conflict and you have to abort. Show the pilot how that happens. What happened? What went wrong? Did anybody learn something from this? Let's not do it again. And those are the types of things that immersive simulation can do. And we have the capacity to actually have controllers control airplanes on radar scopes and in simulators together so they can practice these things. And I think it's a terrific advantage. I think it enhances safety greatly. If you've already seen a maneuver 2 or 3 times and know what what got you into it and how to properly get out of it, I think that's a great benefit.
Well, thank you. Mayor Chair Homendy, has the NTSB ever made a safety recommendation to the FAA based on a relationship between an exact number of hours spent flying an aircraft versus using other kinds of structured training programs?
No, Senator, we have not.
Thank you. Now, Chair Homendy, do you agree with each of the former FAA administrators and Administrator Whitaker that based on your experience at the NTSB, incorporating the most advanced simulator technology into structured pilot training programs may play a role in improving safety outcomes?
Yes, there is a role for technology. What doesn't exist is the safety data to show how much sim time and how much actual flying time is the right amount.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Santa, as discussed here today, air traffic control staffing is an integral component of our safety in our national airspace. I understand the FAA has the authority for direct hiring of individuals into en route and terminal facilities from FAA-certified colleges and academies, such as Arizona State and Embry-Riddle Tech universities. Now, I could do this by reviving the Collegiate Training Initiative, or CTI program. You yourself went from the community college of Beaver County through CTI and were directly hired into a chronically understaffed facility. Do you think the FAA should establish a program like this to direct hire into facilities to supplement the staffing of our facilities across the country?
Thank you for the question. It would certainly be valuable to increase the throughput and subsidize the academy, but as I said before, the standards can't be lessened by those schools, and the oversight needs to be maintained.
Thank you. And my last question, Mr. Santa, today at most airports, controllers still use paper flight strips to keep track of flights. I've actually seen it myself in Arizona. The FAA's Terminal Flight Data Manager Program, or TFDM, is modernizing the system and will increase controllers' situational awareness to allow them to better handle fluctuations in traffic volume and changing weather. Unfortunately, due to budget constraints, the FAA recently reduced the number of airports that receive this important technology from 89 down to 49, including removing 4 airports in my home state of Arizona. Could you talk about how TFDM reduces operational safety risk by increasing controllers' heads-up time, and why controllers at all these airports will benefit from TFDM?
It's not only TFDM, but it's all modernization is stalled, and every tool and every implementation of new collaboratively determined technology helps our controllers with separation, surface surveillance, management of traffic and capacity. And my most recent data says it's down from 89 to 32 sites due to lack of funding. So it continues to attrit down due to lack of funding.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Sinema. I now recognize Senator Klobuchar for her 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of you. We have I'm trying to get the video on here. There we go. We're in the middle of a big judiciary hearing, so I appreciate the ability to ask some questions via video. We have seen an alarming number of close call incidences on airport runways throughout the year. And these incidences are preventable, we all know that, because we have gone for years without incidents like this. The NTSB has called for the expanded use of airport technologies to mitigate the risk. I have an amendment to the FAA bill to direct the FAA to issue recommendations on cockpit alerting technologies that directly alert crews and pilots of potential incursions to prevent these near misses. How can equipping pilots with technology prevent runway incursions and close calls? And I would ask that of you, Ms. Hamindi.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it's one of our oldest recommendations going back to 23 years. I mean, the reason why you have cockpit alerting is if the controller misses something. And if the controller misses something, then something can alert the pilots to take action.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Errol, can you discuss why cockpit alerting systems are important and when we can expect a requirement from the FAA?
Thank you, Senator. As an air traffic controller and within the air traffic organization, that would be outside our area of expertise or responsibility. I would defer to my colleagues in aviation safety on the regulatory side or anyone with the flight deck area of concern.
Senator?
Okay. Yes, if you could, and then I have to go into vote in this markup right now, and they need me there in person. So do you want a quick answer, and then I'll go in there?
Oh, understood. This is the same thing we saw in 2007. There were a number of runway incursions, including in O'Hare and in Seattle, and then a terrible tragedy occurred, and 49 out of 50 people on the plane died. At that point, we issued recommendations for technology. It's critical to save lives.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that, and I'm going to follow up in writing, and thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. I do not have any other senators in line to ask additional questions at this time, so we're going to begin a second round of questions. I want to follow up the simulator discussion. There are already multiple ways to get to the ATP requirement under the 1,500-hour rule. If you're a military pilot, you only need 750 hours because of the very structured training you get as a military pilot and the use of full motion simulators. If you graduate from a 4-year aviation school, many of which are very good ones in Kansas, by the way, for my ranking member, then you only need 1,000 hours. Because of that good structured training and the simulators that are used. If you go to a 2-year program and get an associate's degree in aviation, you only need 1,250 hours. Where we are right now is this discussion on the 1,500-hour rule there's a difference in opinion of what exactly is a simulator. You can't just say structured flight training in a simulator will qualify you one-for-one, zero-sum game. Every hour you fly in a simulator, you can deduct an hour away from the 1,500-hour rule, especially if you don't define what type of simulator. And that is the key thing, because there's a hesitation to act because we know in industry, or at least in some carriers, they will fail to use simulator time effectively. Look no further than the Kogan incidents, where they have simulators, but in the NTSB's accident report from the Kogan incident, it was found that Kogan company training did not have part of their training syllabus for simulator training at the time of the accident, procedures for how to deal with a stick pusher system to overcome the icing condition. And they were never taught that, even though they had simulators. I think that if we're going to talk about simulators, hearing today, addressing close calls to improve aviation safety. This may be the most important hearing we have all year, and I want to thank Chair Cantwell, Ranking Member Cruz, and Ranking Member Moran for their help in making this hearing happen. The near misses we've been seeing recently are not normal. They are a warning that our aviation system is under stress. And today, we will have an opportunity to hear from several key stakeholders about why we are experiencing so many near misses and what we need to do to increase our safety margins. We will hear from National Transportation Safety Chair. How do we get to 1,500 hours? How do we get to that first officer's seat in that commercial airliner, whether it is a regional jet or 737 or whatever that is, and we have to do that in a way that we put forward the best, safest pilots possible. And I am concerned that we're doing a one-for-one swap without clearly stating, a one-for-one swap in not 1,500 hours, without clearly stating exactly what type of simulator is being used and what type of training is being used. And you know, Scott Cambrosi, Mr. Babu, would you associate yourself with my assessment there, that it's important to be specific as to what type of simulator?
I can tell you from industry, if you don't, or if you are not specific, they will go to the minimum. So we absolutely need to spell out exactly what needs to be done and what level of simulation and what structure needs to be to any training that you're referring, because if not, if you leave it nebulous and ambivalent, X credit for who knows what, they will make it a race to the bottom.
And I would agree. I think you have to be crystal clear on the quality of the simulation gets you so much. And as I mentioned earlier, the ARCs have defined some of the, but I think one of the things that everybody should remember with simulation, you're teaching a technique.
Yes.
This is how you do this, and you can do it without danger. And if you make a mistake, okay, so the simulator crashes, but nobody gets hurt. Yes. But you won't do it again. And so it's a technique training, and I think that you can't use that completely to say, well, that's all the flight time I need. No, that's not accurate either. But it's a great training tool. It's a great exposure. You've seen these things before. You've seen it in simulation, so you're prepared for it when it happens. Early pilot told me a long time ago, good pilot's never a surprise pilot.
Thank you, Mr. Babbitt. I'm going to indulge further. I'm going to give you extra time, Mr. Moran. Mrs. Santa, I want to get back to this crew rest idea. We understand and base air crew rests on scientific methods, as Captain Brosi has mentioned, and that's really important. I remember when I was at Walter Reed, one of my first surgeries for which I was conscious I was going to go into surgery for was going to be a 14-hour surgery, and my surgeon came up to me just as they were putting the anesthetic into me that would put me under, and said, I've been planning this all week. I know exactly what I'm going to do. It's going to be 14 to 18-hour surgery. We're going to take care of you. You're going to be great. I've been up all night thinking about this. And just as I was about to go to sleep, the last thing I remember saying to him was like, did you get any sleep, doc? Because I would feel better knowing that you'd gotten some sleep. And so I want Mrs. Santa to give you time to talk about this rest issue, because I do believe that we've gone to a point with air traffic controllers, because there's such staffing shortages, because there's such demand, that we're going with the minimum rest required in order to give someone before they show up for work the next day. And that minimum should not become the standard.
Thank you for the time. I just want to clarify a few things. Our schedules are in accordance with the orders to allow enough crew rest. It's the expansion of 10-hour days and 6-day work weeks that really exacerbates the fatigue and introduces potential risks. With a fully functioning and fully staffed air traffic control facility, that would be lessened. The FAA's chronic statement is we can get more productivity out of our controllers, and we need to change the schedules of our controllers. No, the answer is not continuing to burden us with more fatigue and continuing to burden us with more effort and work. It's hiring the right amount of controllers so that our facilities are not 70 and 60 and 80% staffed. It's untenable, and it needs to be corrected through hiring and not changing the standards.
Thank you. Senator Cruz is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to start off with Mr. Errol. For the past decade, the FAA has met or nearly met its hiring goal for air traffic controllers. This year, the FAA hired 1,500 future controllers to go through the ATC Academy. Next year, that number will be 1,800. But 30% are likely to wash out. Add in retirements and other constraints, and how many controllers will we be at next year?
Thank you, Senator. Could you repeat the question? How many controllers total we have or higher?
How many will we be at next year?
As we continue certified controllers, we expect to be over 11,000 certified controllers making our way up. We intend to continue to hire at our maximum current rate of 1,800 or slightly better in the near future.
So at this rate, it would take years for the FAA to hire enough controllers to meet the need, especially given that it is a multi-year process from initial hiring to becoming a fully certified controller. Would an additional ATC controller training facility help boost capacity and improve retention and performance of the workforce?
Senator, one of the challenges that we have, or the greatest challenge, is not the physical space or the amount of the academy. It's the number of retired controllers, either military or FAA, that are available to provide instruction and are willing to locate to where the region where the academy may be. Some of the strategies that we're trying to explore is augmenting the training in our current Oklahoma City Academy for upper radar classes out to other federal facilities and freeing up that finite number of instructors that are available to provide that instruction to focus on new hires at the academy. So it's a delicate balance of trying to find the right qualified people to provide that training.
Thank you very much. Chair Homendy, thank you for being here today and staying on the subject of air traffic controllers. An OIG report says 77% of critical ATC facilities are understaffed, with New York Terminal Radar Approach Control at 54%. Given that a majority of the critical ATC facilities are understaffed, are you concerned about the impact of that on safety of the airspace?
Absolutely. I'm happy to continue.
Please.
Okay. I just wanted to be respectful of your time. Absolutely, I am worried about safety. What's happening from the staffing shortage is that air traffic controllers are being required to do mandatory overtime. And what happens with mandatory overtime? It ends up leading to fatigue and distraction, which is exactly what we're seeing as part of these incident investigations. And it all just comes down to the shortage of staffing.
You recently said that, quote, the FAA system for certifying pilots and mechanics hasn't kept up with the science around mental health, let alone modern attitudes, and called it an open secret that current rules incentivize pilots to lie about their mental health history or avoid seeking help. Yesterday, I sent you a letter expressing my concern about this issue and asking what safety changes should be made. Does the FAA and the NTSB have a full understanding of how pervasive pilot mental health issues are?
If we just took CDC numbers of 1 in 5 U.S. adults live with a mental health challenge, That's about 58 million Americans. And then we look at FAA's civil airmen statistics, which show that there are about 757,000 pilots, including students, recreational, sport. Then you're looking at about 114,000 to 151,000 pilots that have mental health challenges. People are suffering in silence.
Captain Ambrosi, it's very concerning that ALPA and the FAA refused to comply with the National Academy study that Congress asked for in the 2018 FAA reauthorization. It is Congress's job to provide oversight of federal programs, and both the FAA and ALPA deliberately stood in the way of that by refusing to provide data owned by the federal government needed for the report. And I would urge ALPA to reconsider your refusal to cooperate. Turning to a question. In October, an Alaska Airlines pilot tried to crash an airplane. The pilot has claimed to have been suffering from mental issues and had taken psychedelic mushrooms in the days prior to the incident. Do you know when the Alaska Airlines pilot was last drug tested?
I do not.
Does ALPA support additional drug testing requirements for pilots to make sure that they haven't been abusing substances before they fly?
The ongoing drug testing program is reviewed regularly. I'm not an expert on the drug testing program, but pilots are one of the highest scrutinized professions out there. We go through regular drug testing, regular checks in training, line checks, line observations. So an extremely rare incident is this. I share your outrage at this specific incident. However, you know, it calls for a panel to discuss mental health is what we should do.
So why did ALPA refuse to cooperate with the National Academy study that Congress had mandated?
So I think the HIMSS program is being conflated with pilot mental health. The HIMSS program is a occupational substance abuse and treatment program, and we actually did cooperate with the Academy. However, as the study notes, ALPA is not the owner of that database. So I received your letter yesterday. I'm happy to do more research on it and reply with in writing and meet with your team to discuss further by the deadline.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Senator Thune.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me just start by saying that the wider use of new technologies has and will continue to improve ATC and airport situational awareness. And I also see technology playing a crucial role in training more well-rounded and well-prepared airline pilots. As the number of incidents increases, the last thing this committee should do is remain complacent, which is why Senator Sinema and I offered an amendment to the Senate FAA reauthorization codifying the recommendations of the Air Carrier Training ARC to create a 2-month enhanced qualification program. This detailed course of instruction paired with advanced simulator training from seasoned airline pilots would expose trainees to the cockpits of the jets that they would actually be flying, and importantly, allow them to experience what it's like to handle challenging and dangerous situations in those cockpits. Mr. Babbitt, your bipartisan letter calling on Congress to expand the use of simulator training stated that, and I quote, requiring the repeated practice of the prevention of and recovery from myriad real-world accident scenarios in full-motion flight simulators will make better pilots, end quote. Could you elaborate on why the use of new simulator technologies is so crucial to training well-rounded pilots?
Sure, and thank you for the question. I think the ability we have today with the modern simulation exposes pilots to situations that you simply wouldn't put them in. We killed a number of pilots in the past, accidents, practicing engine failures on takeoff in real airplanes. If it didn't go well, they died. And we learned from that, and we've now created scenarios. The other thing I think we get in the simulation world is the ability to put people in an environment, and I don't just mean in the airplane environment, I mean in the cockpit environment. You have 1,500 hours. Is any of that with another pilot? Are you always just a pilot in command? And the answer, you could be. Well, that's not what you're going to do when you go over to work as a commercial airline pilot. You're going to be in a crew situation. You need to understand crew resource management. You need to know what happens when the captain is suggesting something that you don't think is operationally correct. Have you learned how to deal with that? You do in a simulator. And so I think all of these lead us to much better trained. They've been exposed to many things that you simply won't get exposed to. Are you going to fly your light airplane into a heavy thunderstorm and hail? No, you're not twice. So, you know, these do put us in situations where you can learn from it. Wow, we'll never do that again. I see what happened. I'll give myself as an example. In 1981, there was a tragic accident in wind shear in Dallas-Fort Worth. Every airline pilot in this country had to go get an hour in the simulator because Airbus, Boeing, and the FAA together changed the technique to recover from stalls. Every pilot in this country had to go get an hour in the simulator, and I remember mine. They said, just shoot the approach and recover just like you knew how to do. And we did, and we crashed. They said, now we're going to use the new technique. We learned it, and it was great exposure. And we've learned so much. Wind shear is not the problem that it was back then. So I think simulation adds a huge layer of learning and expertise and coordination to the system and safety.
Thank you. Ms. Holmandy, I fully recognize the value of cockpit experience, and I see time in real aircraft as an essential part of training airline pilots. Or I'm concerned that the rote accumulation, as Mr. Babbitt has noted, of flight hours doesn't provide trainees with adequate exposure to commercial aircraft or prepare them for the unexpected, potentially dangerous scenarios. Do you see a role for the enhanced use of new technologies, including advanced full-flight simulators, to improve exposure of prospective airline pilots to scenarios that they couldn't otherwise encounter in real aircraft?
Yes, there is always a role for simulators as part of training, but the most realistic scenario-based training so that pilots become proficient.
Okay, thank you. Let me just, if I could, Mr. Errol, during my time as chairman of this committee, we considered and enacted the FAA Reauthorization Act of 2018 and included prioritization of next-gen upgrades to bolster the nation's air traffic control system. These upgrades, in addition to employing concepts such as dynamic airspace management, will allow the United States to better utilize existing infrastructure, increasing the capacity and efficiency of the NAS. Recent ATC issues at airports across the country have certainly highlighted the need for modernization. From your perspective, what technology upgrades should be prioritized to avoid preventable incidents like those we've seen around the country?
Thank you, Senator. Anything that it helps to increase situational awareness for everyone involved is a great technology improvement, and the agency is in the process of doing a technology sprint, launching 3 areas of technology, one around approach runway verification, which will be or is available in all of our approach control automation systems now and can be programmed locally to detect wrong surface landing. There's the runway incursion device that will be deployed in the next year to year and a half at over 70 towers to provide an audible and visual alarm to controllers if they were to clear someone for takeoff or landing on a runway that had been released for another activity. And then lastly, a surface awareness initiative that we've kicked off for rapid acquisition and hope to have in place at our first facility by June of '24 for commercially available services that provide situational awareness similar to what any pilot can bring into their aircraft now with an iPad and they have good situational awareness of aircraft operating around. So anything that increases the sharing and real-time exchange of data between aircraft operators and air traffic controllers and provide that common situational awareness as well as safety logic is all helpful.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, my time has expired, but I have some additional questions I'd like to submit for the record. Thank you.
Without objection. Senator Hickenlooper?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank all of you for being here. This certainly is a timely opportunity to make sure that we get not just senators educated, but the broader population of our country and the world. Mr. Arrow, let me start with you. The cost to build a traditional air traffic control tower can reach up to $20 million. For airports serving rural communities, this can be a real impediment. In Colorado, we have the Northern Colorado Regional Airport, which is actually going out and trying to build their own tower to attract new and reliable air service from airlines by making sure that they do install a remote tower project. So if approved by the FAA, this will, without question, grow the local economy. It's important for the FAA safely, it's important that the FAA safely integrates leading edge technologies into our aviation system. So my question is, what is the FAA doing to spur innovation and safety in these regional airports that really do play such a big role, such as Northern Colorado Airport, in in pursuing remote tower projects?
Thank you, Senator. My organization works closely with our NextGen organization as they explore remote tower technology, and certainly there's an opportunity there and some promise. The initial technology that's been evaluated to date did have some shortfalls. I can tell you as a former controller, what we want to make sure is that the system works, that it's reliable, and that it provides that level, that equivalent level of safety that we see in a staff tower. There is, again, some promise. We're continuing to do that work. Our NextGen office is bringing additional technology into our tech center in New Jersey, where we're allowing vendors to bring in that technology, demonstrate it, build that level of trust prior to us issuing a certification that it meets that same standard as our staff towers.
Great. That's I mean, anything I say, I've heard this, we're watching part of this from the office, the safety first is what pretty much the mantra that I expect in what we've been hearing. Ms. Hamandi, these recent runway near misses, these incidents of close to catastrophic proportions seem to be increasing at an alarming rate. In September, DIA, Denver International Airport, opened a new taxiway that hopefully is going to eliminate what they call a hotspot, where aircraft volume has increased risks of unintended, or not unintended, but all of airspace collisions. The bipartisan infrastructure law continues to make strategic investments to improve airfield lighting, to modernize runways, taxi infrastructure, improve safety. Which effective project designs, which best practices does the NTSB recommend that airports should implement following these recent runway safety meetings that, I assume is happening nationwide?
We don't have any current recommendations on that. I think we may have past recommendations that we've closed, and I'm happy to give those to you.
Great. But I think it is obviously a national issue, and I think the more ways we can look at it, the more successful we'll be. Mr. Ambrosi, the Bureau of Labor Statistics estimates that there'll be a 13% increase in the need for pilots by 2030. Some people think that might be conservative. Obviously, aviation is a key part of our economy, job growth. It also affects a lot of other components and elements of our economy. Among the many pathways available for an aspiring student to become a certified pilot, airlines are also establishing dedicated academies. United Airlines has their Aviate Academy to further increase the training available to young pilots. Obviously, I think this increases safety. In Denver, we have Metropolitan State University, which is the first university in Colorado to be accredited by the FAA to offer a curriculum to aspiring pilots so that they can achieve a restricted air transport pilot certificate. And MSU is partnering with a number of affiliate flight schools in the communities in the greater metropolitan area. Would you describe the impact, or how would you describe, or could you describe, I know you can, could you describe the impact that accredited university programs like MSU's in Denver, that they have on growing the pipeline of trained pilots?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. As you know, there's more than one pathway to getting that ATP, and having an academic program such as that, a 2-year degree gets you a 250-hour reduction. A 4-year degree gets you a 500-hour reduction, gets you that RATP, as you mentioned. That's because of advanced academics. So these pilots are learning more. They're getting this advanced academics, which is a credit towards the program. So it's a very good pipeline. The aviation schools such as that the pipeline's full. It's good to be a pilot right now, and people are coming to these schools in rapid fashion to be part of this occupation. So it's an essential part of what we do to get pilots in the pipeline.
Great. Yeah, I was very impressed. We went through it and looked at what they were doing, and it was a great source of optimism. So anyway, thank you all for all the work you're doing to keep the skies safe. I yield back to the chair.
Thank you. The incredibly patient Senator Markey.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks you for holding this incredibly important hearing. I share my colleagues' serious concerns about the recent series of near-miss incidents which have impacted my home state of Massachusetts as well. In late February, 2 planes nearly collided at Boston Logan Airport when one attempted to take off as another one was landing. And in March, the wings of 2 United Airlines planes clipped each other at Logan. Fortunately, no one was seriously hurt in these incidents, but passengers and flight crews are understandably worried about the safety of U.S. air travel. So, Chair Hamidi, I understand that the National Transportation Safety Board investigated the near miss at Logan from February. Can you provide an update on that investigation?
Yes, we issued a final report on that investigation, and the Hoppa flight pilot thought he heard that he could go forward. He was told to line up and wait, but he began his takeoff roll and said that, reported to us that he was not feeling well that day, and that possibly he was experiencing some things from the cold weather in Boston.
And how do you correct that with that pilot? He misheard an instruction?
Yeah, I mean, there has been a lot of fatigue, distraction, pilots mishearing instructions in all the investigations that we're conducting. I mean, the one thing that's good at your airport is you have ASDX. It's not the same in other airports.
I see. And what does that mean? What's that additional?
So ASDX alerts the controllers that there's an impending collision and can take action to prevent it.
Yeah. Should that be mandatory at all airports?
I think it should be mandatory at the most, at least medium or large-sized airports, but right now it's at...
Is that what saved us at Logan?
Yeah.
Yeah. So...
That takes resources for the FAA. We need robust funding for the FAA, sustainable funding.
Right. Yeah, but again, like when you drive in a car, if the driver makes a mistake, the airbag is still there as the backup.
Exactly. It provides the safety net.
And that's what FTX is.
That's right.
It's the airbag. It's the extra safety measure where there has been operator error. So I think that's something that we should absolutely be talking about. And I'm glad, again, I'm glad that NTSB is investigating these incidents. Now I'd like to turn to another threat to aviation safety, climate change, from increased turbulence in the sky to flooded runways. Climate change is already having serious consequences for our aviation system. Coastal airports, like in my home state of Massachusetts, are especially threatened by ocean level rise. Our airport is just on landfill in Boston Harbor, which is the second fastest warming body of water on Earth. That's how fast it's all warming there. As a Brookings report declared earlier this year, America's airports aren't ready for climate change. If we don't invest in climate resilience at our airports, we are in for a bumpy ride. To each of our witnesses, starting with Chairman Holliday, do you agree that climate change is a significant threat to aviation safety?
I am not a climate change expert, but I agree.
Captain?
Yes, so I would agree. I'm not a climate change expert, but we completely agree, and pilots do a lot to try to minimize carbon emissions, also noise. So we're an active participant in reducing greenhouse gases in the aviation profession.
Thank you.
As an air traffic controller, it's really not impacted us at all. So personally, I believe that climate change has an impact, but as an air traffic controller, I can't say yes.
Thank you.
Yes, I think you're seeing more violent weather, which is not helpful. Also, the slowly rising temperatures, aircraft, a lot of people aren't aware, but as the temperature gets higher and higher, the aircraft needs longer runways. And so you're pushing the envelope there as well.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. We certainly have seen a significant increase in severe weather throughout this last summer season, and we join you in supporting everything we can do to minimize the impacts of that.
Thank you. And that's why I filed legislation with Senator Sullivan, the Airport Infrastructure Resiliency Act, bipartisan. We can see it's coming. We need to actually have more protection, and another piece of legislation, Airline Operational Resiliency Act, with Senators Fisher and Welsh and Capito, aim to improve the overall resiliency. And finally, today's hearing would be incomplete if we didn't discuss the role that airport service workers play in keeping our airports safe. baggage handlers, wheelchair attendants, gate attendants, other workers play an essential role in our aviation system. And by providing airport service workers a living wage and benefits, we ensure that airports have a well-trained and experienced workforce to identify security incidents and respond to emergency situations. When we shortchange airport service workers, we leave our airports and passengers vulnerable. Earlier this morning, I rallied with airport service workers, SEIU, and called on Congress to pass the Good Jobs for Good Airports Act. And that will ensure that these workers, these hidden figures at the airport who ensure that the planes can take off every day and safely, get fair wages, healthcare benefits, sick time, which they're not getting right now. And we have to make sure that all this federal money that we send to airports actually gets distributed in a way that's a lot more fair. We saw how hard they worked during the pandemic. We saw the risks that they took for their health and their families in order to make the rest of us safe at those airports. And we just have to rectify that historic imbalance in terms of how much the airlines are profiting by the billions and how much these workers are still being left behind without the benefits they deserve. So I just want to raise that once again. And thank you, Madam Chair, for your great leadership.
Thank you, Senator Markey. As we've heard today, there are many things that we can do to improve the safety of our aviation system in this country, which is the global leader in safety when it comes to commercial aviation operations. Today's hearing demonstrates that we must address the serious near misses we've seen recently with the utmost sense of urgency and to prevent future incidents. We've dealt with everything from workforce shortages for air traffic controllers to pilots to maintenance workers, and the pending FAA reauthorization legislation addresses this. In partnership with my ranking member, we have tripled the funding in this FAA reauthorization bill for pilots, for maintenance workers, for air traffic controllers, all of those programs. In the midst of this serious discussion, reducing the amount of aeronautical experience for pilots is the wrong idea at the wrong time. And I just want to reiterate the history of the 1,500-hour rule. It came about post-Colgan crash. And Congress went to the airlines and said, what is the minimum number of flight hours that is needed? And it was the airlines who came back and said 1,500 hours. This number was reached through consultation with the commercial air carriers who came back and said that is what is required. And that level has kept us safe, has kept the flying public safe in the years since. There are already multiple ways to become a commercial airline first officer. There are multiple ways already to get that ATP. Not every pilot that ends up in a commercial airline as a first officer has 1,500 hours. You can be an airline, you can become a military pilot, 750 hours. You can go to a 4-year aeronautical program with a very structured training program, very rigorous program. You can do 1,000 hours. You can attend at any one of our great 2-year programs. We have many of those in Illinois, very proud of them. 1,250 hours. And then for those who don't go through any of those formal programs, who just go down to the local FBO and start learning to fly, and that is a very legitimate, valid way to work your way in, it's 1,500 hours. Rather than watering down existing safety standards, we must always be looking to enhance aviation safety. Today, we've discussed the fact that a simulator is not a simulator, is not a simulator. We cannot forget that the United States can only lead in aviation if it leads to aviation, if it leads in aviation safety. And again, if we're going to be talking about simulators, we need to be clear what type of simulator we're talking about. Because as Captain Ambrosi says, if you just say structured training and don't define what that simulator is, there will be a race to the bottom by the airlines to go with the lowest level simulator, the cheapest level simulator possible. And that is not going to be beneficial to the flying public. With Administrator Whitaker at the helm, and he has strong tailwinds with an almost unanimous 98-0 confirmation vote, the FAA already has the legal authority, the expertise, and the discretion to issue standards on pilot training and qualification. You can already do that. In fact, FAA's Aviation Rulemaking Committee is already looking at whether it is appropriate to create yet another pathway to becoming an airline pilot first officer with fewer than 1,500 hours. Again, we have the 4-year program, 1,250, I'm 1,000 hours, 2-year program, 1,250, military pilots, 750, and the FAA is already looking and already has the authority to create yet another pathway. We have an administrator, we have safety experts at FAA, and a process to study this issue to see if changes are required. And if they are, the FAA can certainly act on that. I believe that we do not need any legislative change that could lower that safety bar if you're going to use language such as structured simulator training without defining what that simulator is. I don't think that preemptively reducing the 1,500 hours that was recommended by the airlines and has resulted in over 10 years of safe aviation operations is the way to go. Now, if you're going to do that, again, then we need to say, hey, if you're going to get a minimum level experience in a flight simulator, that needs to be a level D full flight simulator equipped with software capable of accurately recreating flight conditions for the most daunting and dire emergency operations. You know, there are simulators for surgeons as well who can practice different surgeries without actually having to do it on the patient first. But I will paraphrase Captain Sullenberger, who said, you know, if we have a doctor shortage and we have a surgeon shortage, the solution isn't to say, let's make medical school 2 years. The solution isn't to say, let's just have surgeons only do training on a surgery simulator and they don't actually have to operate on patients. That's not the solution. I don't think this is the either extreme end. I'm just saying that if we're going to put in simulators and we're going to reduce the flying hour requirements for that first officer, then let's be clear about what we're substituting it with, and let's be precise about what we're substituting it with. Let's have a curriculum for what that is going to be. Again, you can fly holes in the sky in a simulator just as well as you can fly holes in the sky in a 152. I want to thank our witnesses for your participation today. The hearing record will remain open for 4 weeks until December 7th, 2023. Any senator that would like to submit questions for the record should do so 2 weeks from now by November 23rd. We ask that responses be returned to the committee by December 7th, 2023. And that concludes today's hearing. Thank you, everyone.